All right, well, thanks, everyone. Thanks for being here with us. So I'm Jess. I'm an investor at AO, which is a global venture capital fund that invests in built world and climate tech-related investments. We do seed up until Series B investing. And with me today is Anthony Baker, who is one of our portfolio company founders and one of the most interesting guys in the Earth observation space. So he's building a company called SatVu, which has the highest resolution thermal imagery taken from space of the Earth's surface, but I'll let Anthony tell us a bit more about it. So I'll let you maybe give us a bit of background on the company and yourself.
Great, thank you, and thank you for attending. Yes, so SatVu has launched a satellite into space with SpaceX last year, and it has a very high resolution thermal camera. So what does that mean? We can detect on the heat emissions from any building on the planet. And heat emissions can be all sorts of things. Where in the world are we wasting energy? But the interesting factor is we can determine activity. So a lot of, if you look at Google Earth and other technologies like radar, you can see the outside of a structure. But we can tell you if that factory is active, if that polluting, if the outflow is pollution, etc. So this activity base has many applications in keeping the world safer and more sustainable.
I mean, that's the interesting thing about it, right? There's so many different applications for thermal imagery from space. It's truly incredible, and it spans so many different sectors. But maybe it's worthwhile you just walking us through one, two, or maybe three of the most interesting and, I guess, applications that can't be done by any other sensing type.
Yeah, this is really quite transformational. Where we've seen very strong uptake is from looking at industrial activity. So we've had pictures of power stations, for example. And the power stations have many outbuildings, and those buildings are where the turbines are housed. From outside, from Google Earth, you can't see whether that's active or it's not. With our data, you can see these turbines on or off. And that one view gives you multiple different data sets. So if you're interested in how much fossil fuels are being burnt, like natural gas, for example, we could tell you, based on the activity, probably how much gas is being burnt, or the carbon output from that as well. And then it's generating electricity, and how's that balancing with sustainable sources? So we're a single source of truth globally. So we've been asked to look at all of the power stations in China and to aggregate that and to determine how much gas they're burning and how much fossil fuel is used to generate electricity and the carbon output. And this is now the must-have data set from all the traders, energy traders, hedge funds, etc., competitive analysis. This is early indicators which they've never seen before this early. So we can see when a refinery is coming on scale, online, etc. Then there's applications around climate. So we know that it's hotter in the city than the rural areas in the summer, but that's called an urban heat island. But which buildings, which car parks are causing that? And we can steer the climate dollars to go and fix these things. And when they are fixed, we can check to make sure that it was performed correctly. So the mitigation would be around a car park, plant more trees. So you want to look at the health of the trees that are already there, plant more, make sure they stay alive, and you can see physically the temperature dropping. And there's been cases in Sacramento, by just painting a few roads white, that temperatures drop down 7 degrees. Other applications in the maritime environment, so pirate ships or illegal trading, illegal fishing, they have a beacon on board, but as soon as they leave the port, they switch it off. So there are satellites that monitor this, but as soon as it goes off, that's when you want to have eyes on them. What are they up to? And with thermal cameras, you can see that very easily. You can see the transfer of goods from one ship to another. You can categorize that ship from its heat signature. So it's a new layer of data, which is very powerful and very informative.
I think the one other use case you maybe didn't touch on enough, but it's really interesting to us, but there's a lot of regulation going into the amount of emissions a building produces and the amount of energy consumed within buildings globally, which is about 40% of total climate emissions, comes from the built world generally. But it's very difficult to monitor and enforce this regulation. And so the one thing you can do with SatVu that is absolutely incredible is you can look at the ceilings and you can look at the walls of buildings across the globe, and you can measure the heat output of that building. And it can give you a pretty good proxy as to the amount of energy being consumed in that building. And if you're a regulator, you can go and say, how many square meters is this building? What's the heat output of that building? And is this building now compliant with regulation, or is it non-compliant? And you can go and enforce that. So it's a really interesting and uniform global standard data set that can allow you to do well beyond just this, but a lot of incredible and really interesting things. But it leads me to my next question, and there's obviously so many interesting use cases for this, but why has no one done it before? I'm just curious. There's so much investment going into other sensing types. Thermal feels like it's been the laggard, but I don't know why.
So you need the resolution. We're 3.5 meter resolution, which compared with what you're seeing on Google is sort of 50 centimeter and less. It still doesn't sound that impressive. But that's been a big challenge to get it. All our competitors are looking at 100 meters, aspiring to 50 meters resolution. But if you're looking at mankind's influence on the planet, you need this high resolution. It's a lot more informative, has a lot greater value. So it is tough to squeeze it, to make it cheap, to solve these problems. And what we've done is essentially what your iPhone's done. The lens on your iPhone is much smaller than your SLR. And we've managed to make a satellite that's smaller, cheaper, and even it's still quite expensive, but it's much cheaper than the satellites that governments build, which are in the hundreds of millions. And then what your phone does is has algorithms and applications that make the picture as beautiful as your old SLR camera. We're doing the same in thermal infrared. We're stacking the images, all sorts of techniques to be able to get the best out of each pixel, which builds a great moat for us. And we're building great applications that many people can buy. So we're trying to concentrate on the unit economics and make sure that this product can be sold to many people, ingested into their existing workflows, etc.
I think that's the one thing that a lot of people don't appreciate about the Earth observation sector and satellites generally, is it's not just about putting high-tech hardware in space, but there's a huge piece of data infrastructure that exists behind the scenes to actually process the images. I mean, your iPhone is running some incredibly complex software to make the images look as nice as they do. It's not just about the sensor they put on the front. And the same thing's happening here and with a lot of satellite companies. But Anthony, I guess I'm also interested to understand a bit more. So we're still early on in this journey. We're going to have a bunch of satellites in space very, very soon. But where do you see the company going over the next 10 years, maybe 20 years even?
So you're right. We've had one satellite launched last year. We've got two going to be launched this year. We're aspiring to 9 satellites in the very short term. That's much less than a lot of other people because our satellites are very agile. We can come back to the same point on Earth every couple of hours with 9 satellites. So that means we can look at the pattern of life, etc. So we can see how many shifts people are running. And that level of granularity and revisit is quite unprecedented as well. So beyond that, I think it's the aggregation of our data with other insights. No one insight from Earth observation will provide the total solution. It's getting the data such that end users can use it. Now, you might not be aware, or you could be aware, that on your phone there's 2 major satellite applications. There's the weather, and there's the GPS, which is your mapping app. You just use those as if the satellites are there and it's working fine. We see that Earth observation is the next barrier, the next application to be on your phone and providing information, whether it's how green things are, what I should be doing next. This level of integration with our lives is not quite there, and that's the next challenge, which I think in the next 5 to 10 years will be solved.
Awesome. I think we're running out of time, so I might make this the last question. But we didn't touch on this much now, but you've got a very long, interesting, and storied career within Earth observation generally, and it's an industry that's fascinating to me because it has changed so much over the last 2 decades plus, right? I mean, there's so much that's happened, but it'd be good just to get your broad perspective. You know, what's changed in the industry? Is it easier for innovation now? Do you see a really, really bright future for space tech, or is it going to become more competitive and clustered? I mean, generally, just some comments.
I do see a bright future. The big things that have changed is launch. So Elon Musk, for example, typically you pay for launch per kilogram. So I've paid $50,000 to launch 1 kilogram of satellite, and now with Elon we're paying $6,000. So that before you would optimize to make things light, shave some more weight off, save some more money. Now you're optimizing for performance rather than mass, because launch is not the most expensive part. Secondly, if you wanted to launch a sophisticated sensor, you try and find something that the military has spent billions of dollars on and try and get it declassified so that you could put it on your satellite. Now, you take a sensor that's on an automobile or commercial off the shelf, and then you just space harden it and then launch that. So that you get the economies of scale, you get the Moore's law in evolution of things, rather than sticking with 20-year-old satellite technology. And you can afford to take a little bit more risk and fail occasionally and recover quickly. So that, and basically deregulation and the opportunity that's there. So where I see more development is servicing satellites, recovering satellites so we don't leave so much litter in space, building satellites out there. And although I love the moon missions and I love Elon wanting to go to Mars, and it's helped reduce the cost of launch, I think the big challenge for our industry is to look at Earth and make that better. So what has space done for me today?
I mean, this is a connected question, so I won't count it as a second final question. But what happens when Starship brings down the cost to $50 a kilo from the thousands it is today and the hundreds of thousands it was years ago?
So then the cost of launch becomes close to the cost of my office in London. So the best thing is to build bigger satellites which have more sophistication. We're only coming back every 2 hours. Why not almost persistent, so we can see things day and night persistently? That the granularity and the regularity of the data set will become better and more powerful, and we can hold people accountable for climate mitigation.
We have to regulate space very heavily at that point, so Europe will love it. Awesome. Cool. Thank you so much, Anthony. Thanks, everyone.
Yes.